Yeah.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
I've said the existence of fingernails to me is a positive side effect of my antidepressants. You know, because it says that the anxiety level is at least slightly lowered enough.
So it's a good metric. It's like how deep the fingernail biting goes.
Yeah, pretty much. Because there used to be times where I would bite my nails till they bled.
Oh, okay.
That was when I was really freaking out.
Well, I must admit, I bite mine as well, but mine are more they're long. You know, that's pretty much how it works with me.
Yeah.
It's not a stress reaction. It's more of a I can't be bothered pulling out the nail clipper reaction.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
You know, I'm a guy. We're functional.
In fact, I kind of wish that they could apply such metrics across both genders. The fact that women and functional, what? that could possibly be considered a normal thing.
Look, I think the differences between men and women are a wonderful thing, and it'd be a very boring world if they were exactly the same.
Definitely.
So,
I'm great agreement there.
I'm a great believer in the.
It's my favourite way to justify my weakness.
Look, I'm a great believer in the differences between the genders because the world would be a much more boring place if that, from a guy's point of view, if women went around, you know.
True that.
Can't imagine a world with just men. No.
And
we'd all be building back fences. No.
But also, the world with just women would be equally apocalyptic. Either we'd be able to create this like perfect society a la, Amazon.
Oh, I don't think so. They'd probably go to war over who's wearing pink shoes today.
Exactly. And that's the other end. It's like, or everyone would claw their each other's eyes.
Look, I think the best possible world is like pretty much what we've got now. It's a good mixture. Okay, we may as well kick off. Welcome to the very last class of 312 secondary school this term. I'm sure you're all very pleased with that. Or probably much more relaxed now that most of you would have handed in assignment number 2 as well. What a question? Sorry? Do I have a mic today? Do I have a mic? Yes, I do. That's probably a good reminder, but I've had a very stressful day, so yelling is a good thing. But let me see what we can do with that. How's that? Am I coming through on that okay? Oh. Oh. How's that? Is that clear at the back, or should I make it a bit louder? Okay, good? Yeah? Excellent. Am I still coming through in the back after I broke the microphone? Okay. Right. I appreciate you coming along to the last class. I know how difficult it can be now that we're coming into winter, and things can be a little bit problematical. Let me just up that a bit. Okay, there we go. So I appreciate you all turning up tonight and giving me a reason to be here as well. Tonight we're going to be covering a little bit about one of the key knowledge areas, just to finish off, and then we're going to take a look at project closure, and then I'll just entertain any questions about the course up to now and talk a little bit about the exam structure. So with a bit of luck, we'll all get out of here. There are tutorials this week, by the way, so don't assume just because this is the last lecture evening that there are no tutorials. There still are the final tutorials for this week. And if you haven't handed your assignment in by now, you are officially late. I cleared the box. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about a little bit about human resources, procurement and project closure. So we're now here at the end of our key areas. So we'll talk a bit about organisation structures, a bit about what a contract is, a little bit around activities for project closure, and then we'll talk about just a few things for the exam. So this is what we've covered up until now. The key knowledge areas of project management. We'll cover off the last two briefly tonight. Right, just out of curiosity, who thinks they're now a project manager? After having been through my course for 11 or 12 weeks, who thinks they're a project manager? Okay. You are a project manager? Okay, but you didn't learn that here, did you? No. Where'd you learn that? On the internet? Yeah, I hate to tell you, you're not a project manager. The thing about being a project manager, you can only be a project manager by being a project manager. Learning through a textbook, by attending a course, reading notes, doing an assignment, which is just a simulation of the real world, not the real world itself. These are things that will give you knowledge about project management, but until you've actually run a project, you can't say that you are a project manager. It's a little bit like being an actor. You know, you can read as many books on acting and watch as many movies as you like, but you can't call yourself a film star until you've actually been in a film. These are the things that come into play. Project management is very practitioner-based. It's very experiential. You're only as good as your last project, really, or the types of projects that you've done up until now. What we've done during the course of this term is for me to give you a little bit of knowledge around some of the key areas of project management and maybe give you some simulation experiences in a workshop, and then force you to do a proposal document at the end, which some of you I'm sure will do very, very well at. Others probably stressed out to the, right to the 11th hour. But the reality is in project management, stress is a normal thing. Deadlines are a normal thing. The experience you gain through this course will not entitle you to be a project manager. But when you get into a project environment, you'll probably know a little bit about what a real project manager does, and you can watch them. But if you want to become a project manager yourself, and I recommend it as a career option for those of you who are thinking about what you want to do when you come out of university, going into project management is a wonderful career option. It prepares you for so many other things. You can aspire to run a program, you can just be a very successful project manager and earn lots of money, and believe me, they are well paid, the good ones. You can go on to found your own company, you can run someone else's company, you can basically cover the whole gamut, because the thing about project managers is they're good communicators, they're good organisers, they are good at political awareness, they are good at breaking things down to foundation elements, and they are good at dealing with change and adaptation and stress because they get a lot of practice at it. It's a wonderful career option if you're a bit of a stress puppy. If you like the idea of working in a changeable environment, I heartily recommend it. If you don't like stress, this is probably not the career option for you, because I can pretty much guarantee at the end of every single project, you need to take about a month off and have a holiday. And during the course of the project itself, there are going to be times when you're really just going to climb the wall, I was thin and good looking with a full head of hair when I started being a project manager. Now look at me, this is what it does to you. But it's a good career. I really did enjoy it in the time that I was doing it. But at some point, a project has to end. And this is one of the key things that a lot of project managers, even the experienced ones, don't pay as much attention to as they probably should. Because unless you can close the project down at the end, it's a bit difficult to call it a success. You've got so many things hanging out there that you haven't addressed yet. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different areas tonight and hopefully move things along. Now, I put this slide up right back at the beginning of the term saying that when you're a project manager, you have to manage stakeholders. And that's very true. You show me a project manager who doesn't have human resources skills, who doesn't know how to communicate with people, who doesn't know how to manage people. And I mean truly manage people, not just dictate to them. There's a difference between those two. A manager looks to build up people and develop them in order to get the best out of them. That's a very different thing from saying, you will do it because I tell you to do it. Sometimes you may have to do that, but if they do that all the time and that's their normal mode of operation, something's wrong. But the thing about being a project manager is they know how to manage 360 degrees around them. They know how to manage up, they know how to manage down, they know how to manage sideways. Because at different points, you're going to have to influence people over whom you have no direct authority. Once you can do that well, you'll find you don't have to exercise the authority you do have over your direct reports as much as you would normally. They will want to do things because you're a good leader. But projects by themselves are not a unique environment. They work within a context. A project environment has to meld within the project environment in which it finds itself. The project environment around the project, surrounding the project, is usually the organisation structure. It's pretty rare to find a project that just starts up and has no other connections to the world around it. It is nested within another structure. So I'm going to run you through a couple of the basic ones. Now, there's no magic in this, and it's probably not stuff that you may not have come across. You probably are a little bit familiar with it already. But let's talk about it. Functional hierarchic organisation structure. This is where you've got a boss at the top, you've got a layer of management, and then you've got the operational people down the bottom. So everyone knows who they report to. It's very, very clear where the management structure goes. It has some very specific advantages, such as simple reporting structure. You know who you have to keep pleased and who you report to. Who's going to do your performance review at the end of the year, and whether or not you're talking to the right person who will give you a salary increase by keeping them happy. Only one boss to deal with, and it can be good for departmental level projects, because if you keep it within a department, all of the resources are there present within that department as well. Disadvantages: the PM has reduced authority because when they convene a project, the project manager themselves may report to a department head. That person provides the resources for the project to go forward with. It can be difficult to access external resources because you usually have to ask permission. I remember one particular case where I was talking to someone, a friend of mine actually, and he was relating to me how things worked in his organisation, which is when he wanted something from another department, he had to go to his boss to ask his boss to talk to their boss, to have that boss talk to the boss of the other group, who would then go to the line manager of the department and have the line manager authorise whoever the operational person would be to pass information across. So rather than just being able to go across the room and talk to Joe, you had to go through about 4 different touch points in order to get permission for the information to be extracted. There is a cost in doing business that way. Teams have allegiance to a department more than the project because the department pays their bills and their salary. There's a lack of integration because within a department you can have another department that is doing exactly the same project because the communication between groups may not necessarily be in place. Duplication of effort across silos, so you get multiple resources being wasted because everyone's trying to do the same thing. Whereas if you did it once and just copied it or expanded it out, everyone could actually use the same product, the same piece of software, the same deliverable, whatever it happened to be. But when you've got multiple organisation elements all working on the same thing, then they're all burning up resources. Matrix organisation structure is a little bit different. And this one was and is very, very common, where you have a CEO at the top divided into divisional areas such as information systems, manufacturing and finance. Each of those owns a group of people, and then you set a lateral project that cuts across all of these different groups. So the project manager will cherry pick people from different departments to join their project, but the actual day-to-day or management of those people may still reside within their particular department groups. So, advantages is a high level of integration because everyone kind of knows what everyone else is doing, which is great. You don't have the same level of duplication. Improved communication because the groups interweave with each other much more fluidly. There's an increased project focus because the projects themselves have a highlighted profile across all of the different silo line managers that go down there. And it is pretty good for agile development because if you're working in an agile environment, you can do things flexibly. You can tap the people on the shoulder that you need and to bring into the project. Disadvantages, high potential for conflict, because if your project manager needs you and it happens to be the end of the financial year, for example, and the person who's associated with the project comes from the finance department, the finance managers say, no, we need to close down our business for the end of the year, get all of our numbers together. I'm pulling that person out of the project to go back to their normal day job because we need to finish up 30 June. Poor response times compared to functional because you actually have to ask permission from two different managers, your line manager in charge of your department and your project manager in order to get things done. Team members can be relocated unexpectedly. As I said, you can pull people out of a project, the line manager can pull people out of a project at short notice and increase individual workloads because now that you're working for two bosses, they all expect that you're working 8 hours for them each day, which means 16-hour days. Because the line managers and the project managers may not necessarily talk to each other every single day, but they all expect you to do what you've got to do because in some way, shape or form, you report to both at the same time. Now, my experience with the matrix as an organisation structure is that it works beautifully when the line manager and the project manager have a good relationship. If they talk together, if they communicate, if they are a regular engagement, then this one can work really, really well. When the project manager and the line manager, the department manager, do not get on, they both fight over the same people, the people themselves are caught in the middle, and I can pretty much guarantee that the whole thing will come unglued at some point. Because they'll both say, you work for me, you do this. And of course, if you're the poor person in the middle, having demands placed upon you from two different managers, there's only so many hours in the day. You end up doing a very low quality job across both activities, or you've got to sacrifice one to do the other, which generally means that someone won't like you after that. So the matrix works well mostly in small companies, is what I've found, personally. It does exist in large companies and can work quite well there too, but most of my experience has been that large companies tend to go more for the functional hierarchy model. Small to medium companies do well with a matrix. Project-based organisation structure. This is where the project itself is the organisation structure. So you've got a program manager with many, many projects that report to them, and the program manager as a senior manager makes sure that all of the projects that they're responsible for all go forward together. So advantages, clear lines of responsibility, high level of integration, high communication, resources are readily available and the team becomes something of a family because they're used to working in a project group. And when a project is finished, rather than disband the project group, you pick the project team up and you move them to the next project. So what you've got is a group, highly integrated, working together, who know each other's good points and bad points, and they move from engagement to engagement. You take the whole suite of people across from project to project. Disadvantages, resources are not easily shared because if you're linked emotionally with a particular group, you don't want to work for another group. If they take you and put you somewhere else, you're not happy with that. You've just lost all of this contact with your friends that you love working with. Project can become isolated because the project team tends to work together. They also develop a social dynamic. They can become something like a family, which effectively means that their view of the organisation is the project. Even though all of these other things may be around it, different groups, other projects that are going on, their contact with the organisation is the project, which means they can see themselves as a small organisation within a large organisation, and it's a small organisation that has their loyalty. They're loyal to the project team, not to the organisation structure. I have seen examples where, one particular one I'm thinking of, this particular group finished up a project and the project manager went to one of the senior managers in the organisation and said, I'd like to take the team out and celebrate. So pay for them to go to dinner, we'll have have a nice dinner with a few bottles of wine, a few beers, and, we'll celebrate the closure of this project, because they just won, or they'd won this piece of business and they'd pretty much just finished it up. And the boss, overall boss, said, no, we don't do that in our company, that's not company policy. So the project manager says, well, what about if I just take them to a low-key lunch, and the company pays for it? We'll just go to one of the local cafes or one of the local restaurants. And the senior manager said, no, that's not company policy, we don't do that. So the project manager says, well, what about if I just go out and I get a couple of bottles of wine and, a few cases of beer, and we'll come in and we'll just, in the project room or one of the major meeting rooms, we'll just set it up with a few drinks and nibblies, and we'll just do that. And the manager said, no, we don't allow alcohol on the premises. That's not company policy. And they got into this argument. The ultimate outcome of this argument was the senior manager said, I'm in charge, you will do what I tell you to do, or there's the door. And the project manager says, fine, I'm leaving. And he resigned and left. He handed in his letter of resignation, or went back to his desk, wrote out his letter of resignation, walked back to the boss's office, gave it to him, waved goodbye to his team and said, I can't work for this company anymore, I'm leaving. They wouldn't even spring for some very, small costs. Within 3 months, 3/4 of that project manager's team had also resigned. They left and founded their own little company, specialising in project delivery. There was about 22, 23 of them. 15 of them went out and founded their own company, with the project manager being one of the senior officers of this little consultancy company. The company that they had left behind now just lost most of its intellectual capital around this project that had just been created. They couldn't support the project that they had just finished because there was still work to do. Support, there was a warranty period, there was phase 2 of this project, none of that could get done, which meant that they were now in violation of their contract. So their client, who they were working for, took them to court for creating a product that was not fit for use. Do you know the moral of the story, or the end point of the story? Do you know what happened to the original company? Guess. Yeah? They no longer exist. All because one of the senior managers refused to let the project team celebrate their success. And the people in the project team had more loyalty to the people in the project team than they did to the overall organisation. Once the project manager left, who they liked working with, other people started to leave and follow him, and as soon as their friends left, the ones left behind also got up and left. They wanted to stay together. End result, the original company that was running the project could no longer keep its contracts in place. It didn't go into receivership. It no longer exists because when it couldn't fulfil its contracts anymore, it became a takeover target for one of its rivals, who snapped that up at cost, at a very cheap price. So it no longer existed. So the moral of this story is that if you're working in this sort of environment, make sure that your teams are happy with who they're working and that you have a relationship of the wider company with that project team, because that's how you instill loyalty. Resources not easily shared. Project can become isolated, vulnerable to projectitis. Because the team wants to keep together and it's coming to the end of the project, there may not yet be another project for this team to go work on, so guess what they do? Things slow down and they try and keep the existing project going. So rather than finishing and closing it off, which they could probably do, they will find reasons to try and extend it while waiting for another project to come along, another engagement to come along that this team can now go work for or work upon. That's projectitis, where you keep the project going as long as you possibly can. Teams can become idle while waiting, because if you do finish a deliverable and hand it over to whoever is going to own the product, you don't have another engagement for the project team yet, so the project team is just sitting there in the office, playing Sudoku and Tetris and checking emails and texting each other, coming in late, leaving early, and if you don't have another project for them to get onto immediately, they're burning up money and salary for no actual outcome. So you need something for them to work on. Maybe in the next iteration, the next project is still 2 months away. You've got to support and pay for a project team for 2 months that's absolutely doing nothing. These are the types of examples that you can see within engineering companies. Engineering companies in particular, more so than, say, information technology companies, engineering companies tend to work more on a project basis. They've just built a highway somewhere. Okay, great. That team has so much experience building a highway. We're building a highway somewhere else. We'll just send that team in. Or a skyscraper, or a train station, or a bridge, whatever it happened to be. Engineering companies tend to work more closely with this in information technology. So you've got to think about the organisation structure that best works for you. And this is a fairly recent innovation, the network or cellular structure, because up until technology had matured enough, we couldn't actually do this very well. Now we've got communications technologies, got mobile phones, got laptops, got tablets, we're in communication with everyone. We don't have to sit in the office all the time, we can be scattered and we can still be in communication. The technology keeps us linked. So the cellular or network structure is very good because what you do is you have these discrete departments that are linked to a core body. The core will outsource company functions to each of these external groups. So what you have from a client's perspective down here at the bottom is that they have a relationship with the core company. The core company then brings in what other resources are required. You need marketing? Okay, we've got a link with a marketing company. They will work through us and we'll do your marketing. You want education? Fine, we can do that in the same way. You've got a help desk that has to be supported. Fine, we can go and set up with a professional help desk company. They will report to us, we'll report to you, and all of your help desk needs are taken care of. So what they end up, the core company or core organisation ends up being a broker for all of these other facilities. Of course, they take a cut of all of that activity as well. I have known a couple of very good companies, extremely profitable companies, that on the books only have, I'm thinking of one, it was the managing director, his mum, his dad, 2 administration and 1 financial accountant. That company made millions upon millions upon millions of dollars because their entire activity was orchestrating other companies such as marketing and education and IT and what have you, working for them and then rebadging them and putting them out at a client. That company was 6 people thereabouts. It made so much money. Their headquarters office was one part of a floor in a building down in the CBD, and there were, I think, about 6 offices around the wall, most of which were never actually used, and people kind of came and went as they want. This company made a lot of cash, and it followed this particular model. It was very good. With all of the money that it actually made, it set up other companies. It sponsored other companies and other people doing venture capital to create companies, and it would take an overriding interest in them. And they then also became part of this spidered network. So you'd find that the companies themselves would keep swapping clients back and forwards, and they had a wonderful time. The marketing company would alert the IT company that, there might be a contract over here. The IT company would go to the education and training company and say, oh, we're working with this company, why don't you come along, I will introduce you. And they all talked to the core, who took part of the profit. It was a wonderful business model. Flexible, scalable, can take advantage of local conditions because they were international. They could set up local things in different countries and adapts to a wide geography. Disadvantages, requires orchestration, not just management, because not everyone's going to be in the same situation. You've got to think about where the future is going to go and what you want as part of your cellular structure, what your cellular structure will look like. Less team face-to-face because they tend to be on the road or tend to be scattered around doing work with different locations, but the communication technology comes into play here. You cannot run this sort of company very well without having a high level of ICT. Information Communications Technology. Prone to organisational amputation because like in the previous example where a project team got up and left an organisation and took, you know, a significant part of the company with it, this can also happen here because you've got these wings of expertise working in sub-firms. If one of those disappears, goes broke, goes bankrupt, then your facility in that area also disappears. So if you have a link with an education training company and the education training company gets bought out by a rival, goes into receivership, the owner decides to retire and dissolve it, your company that was using them for their education and training needs now has to find something to fill that gap. Weakened organisational team identity, and it is very technological dependent. But this one is very, very popular. Any company that does outsourcing of any nature is kind of playing with this business model, at least in the edges. Then you've got the formal versus informal one. Formal organisation structure tells us how individuals and groups within a company should relate to each other. That isn't to say they do relate to each other that way, but at least on paper that's how it works. It does not tell us how they actually relate to one another. And then there's the informal information structure which bypasses formal lines of communication, and its power is determined by how one is connected into the network. I remember I was a consulting director. I had a full organisation structure beneath me. My administration manager, who had a team of admin staff that basically looked after all the security, secretarial and office operations for the company that I was within. They reported in to me. I remember going to the lady in charge, Jan, lovely lady, sense of humour, who loved taking the mickey out of me. So this particular day, we'd gotten into a little bit of an argument, friendly argument, and I thought, okay, I'll get her back. So I went downstairs and I got the organisation chart and I updated it, made sure it was all very current. I printed it out and I walked back to her desk in her office with that in one hand and a thumbtack in the other. And I leaned across her desk and I thumbtacked it to the corkboard above her telephone. And I said, Jan, just to let you know, here's the organisation structure for the company. I'm up here, you're down there. Just to make it very clear. And she looked at it and went, Grant, that's really interesting. She pulled the thumbtack, turned it upside down, tacked it back up again. And she looked at it and said, now it's right. I was down the bottom, she was up there. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to win this one. She left that up there for the entire time that we both worked in that company. She was very proud of it, actually. So, you know, all my time updating the organisation chart kind of went to waste. It worked against me. But we had that sort of relationship. We were very informal with each other. Some companies you can pretty much walk up and tell anyone anything. Other ones you've got these formal lines of control where filters get put in place at each successive layer. That really means that if you have a very creative idea at the operations level about how to make improvements to the company, it has to be approved by your team leader, who will change it and take it to the departmental manager, who will look at it and say, that's a good idea, but I need some changes to it. They will change it and take it to the divisional manager, who will take it to the director, who will take it to the general operations manager, who will take it to the CEO. By the time it reaches the CEO, probably 6 months have gone by. The idea has been changed so much that it's no longer recognisable. The CEO looks at it and says, that would have been a good idea about 4 months ago. So what you end up with is that some of these companies, especially the functional hierarchy, can be a victim of their own structure in that they become less agile, less creative, less innovative than some of their smaller brethren. So you've got to take a look at how to get around this. And the thing about informal networking is that if you're tapped into the network, the informal network, talking to people at the coffee machine, you know, you may go for a cup of coffee each day with different people in a cafe. Maybe you have lunch. That sort of thing transgresses lines of authority so that you can actually get a word to the right person, or they can get some ideas from you without necessarily having to go through all of these management layers. Now, every company has an informal structure. If you don't know where the lines of influence in your company happen to be, the informal lines of influence, then I can tell you it's still there, you're just not tapped into it. That means that you have no influence over how decisions might be made in your organisation. Because if all you're doing is relying on the formal organisation chart, there's an entire piece of power structure that is hidden from your view. So I will tell you, it's a really interesting dynamic in an office, because the person who has the high level title may not necessarily be the one with the most power. You take a look around the floor, who is the one that everyone goes and talks to when they have a problem? Who is the one that they want to just, use as a sounding board for an idea? Who is the one that they go and chat to when they're feeling depressed or not very happy about things? Or maybe they're excited and they want to share it with someone. Who do they go to? Look around the floor, because whoever they're going to has a lot of informal power. They can make suggestions, they can give advice that will change the nature of how operations occur because of the people that they're talking to. And they may not necessarily be very high on the organisation chart. Salespeople are actually pretty good at this. They go into a new organisation, they start with the organisation chart, and then they go looking for who has the most power to help them sell to that organisation. And maybe it's the personal assistant to the managing director rather than the managing director themselves, in which case the salesperson coming in from outside will probably, start being very nice to that person who is the gatekeeper to the higher officials. Give them flowers, give them compliments, talk to them nicely. Who's working here? Anyone? I won't ask you specifically for names, but think about your organisation. Who is the one that most people will go and talk to? And if you can't answer the question, you're not part of the network. Because it's there, it exists. If you don't know who most people go to in terms of having conversations, then you're not part of it. And I suggest that you need to be part of it. Because especially if you're a project manager, there'll be a lot going on that you may not necessarily know about through the formal channels. You have to be tapped into the gossip. You have to be tapped in to the conversations that are going on in the background. This is how you can protect your team. This is how you can protect your deliverable, because through these informal influencing factors, you can either change a decision or at least know a decision is coming towards you before it is officially passed over. So think about that. Who has the influence in your organisation? Because it's not the same as the formal organisation chart. So management and relationships, it's a bit of a balancing act. You've got product management and development management, taking a look at who the boss is, who the client is, and who the project team is. The project management has to link the end result with the operational component. So the team is creating a product for a particular deliverable. What is that deliverable? Who is the team? How is success measured? This level of collaboration has to be an ongoing thing, because as soon as you break down and separate out the people who will be measuring the end result and the people who will be creating the end result, I can guarantee they will miss the target. The key stakeholders won't be happy with what you've built. The people who built it may be proud of it, only to find that they've been working to a requirement spec that the client never wanted. The project manager is responsible for tying all of these things together, and they have to do it well. This is why communication skills become so important. It's also around legalities. The project manager has to know something of the legal standards. And these will change from country to country, state to state. So then the question becomes, what's a contract? What is a contract? It's a legal document. Anyone here ever drawn up a contract? Yeah? Any comments on it? On how you go about doing it?
A lot of Googling and I still don't know what I'm doing, but...
Make it up as you go along? Yeah. I can guarantee there were parts of that contract that you probably overlooked. A project manager isn't a lawyer, but they need to know at least some basics about how contracts are put together. because a lot of projects are done on a contractual basis. So the project manager ultimately is the operations manager responsible for delivering a contract. If you don't know what is in your contract, the penalties that are associated with it and the things that you have to do to deliver success, then it's going to be very difficult for you to have success. Remember way back in the beginning I started talking about measurable organisational value. Right back at the start. What's measurable organisational value? Please enlighten me. Tell me you know. What's MOV? I suggest you might want to have a look before the exam. MOV, measurable organisational value, is the benefit that a project brings to the organisation. It has to be measurable. Just saying, you know, product is good is not enough. That's not a success measure. You have to say that the product will open up a new market, we will sell 10,000 units in its first month of operation, we will bring in a profit to the company of $50,000 within the first 4 weeks. There has to be something you can measure. If you can't measure it and measure it accurately, you don't have an MOV. What you've got, maybe a goal, maybe it's a mission statement, maybe it's a general vision, or maybe it's just pie in the sky. But you need something by which you can say, we are successful. This product was delivered. This project created something that achieved its objectives for the business. Because the organisation, the business, won't invest in creating something unless there's a business or organisational reason for it. Why are they doing it? If you don't understand how success is measured for the project, then other people that won't understand either. They will make their own assumptions, and their assumptions might be very different from yours. This is one of the things where, when you're looking at assignment number 2, one of the key aspects is stakeholder management, but another one is make sure that your assumptions are documented about what's in scope and what's out of scope, because you need to explicitly say so. You need to identify MOB. What are the benefits to the organisation? How do we measure, if we deliver this project, that we've actually achieved what the organisation wanted? Just delivering a piece of technology, creating a bit of software, that is not a measurable organisational outcome. You've just created a technical result. You do it for a reason. Have we satisfied the success criteria for that reason? So, reaching some understanding about something, clearly expressing that understanding in writing. This is what a contract is supposed to be. So, there are some phases to go through in terms of contract management. First one, plan the acquisition. What are you trying to do? Procurement management plan, statement of work, scope. Now, you would have done part of this as part of assignment 2, whether you realised it or not. You were trying to plan out what a project delivery cycle would look like in order to be able to deal with PRG, this entity that I created up there in Queensland. You then need to plan the contracting arrangement, documented bid invitation, a request for information or a request for a proposal, and evaluation criteria. Hopefully these are in your assignment 2 document. Request provider responses. Once you've understood what it is you're trying to create and you have at least a general specification and some boundaries, you put it out to the market and says, who wants to do this piece of work? We will hire someone, a company, to do this. That's where you get a qualified vendors list and you issue the request for proposal or the request for tender out to the market and wait for replies. Oh, we can do this, we can do it within 18 months, it'll cost X amount, the money that you're going to put up will be sufficient, this is how we plan on doing it. Select a provider, and you'll usually have a checklist of metrics that you'll go through to try and pick the best one. Maybe cheapest, might be what you're looking for. Maybe highest quality, might be what you're looking for. Maybe the one that can deliver in the shortest time frame, might be what you're looking for. But you have metrics, your organisation has metrics for this proposal that you're hoping another company will create and make real for you. You then have to administer the contract, which means that you have to operationally keep an eye on the contract and make sure it's delivered. Reports, performance, compliance, change control, risk management, all of the things that we've gone through over the last 11 weeks. All of those monitoring and control activities are part of contract management, because you need to make sure that if you have accepted a contract or you've issued a contract, then if you've accepted it, you have to deliver. Contractually, legally, you have to deliver. Otherwise, you can be sued into oblivion. If you're the company that issued the contract, then if the outside organisation completes the deliverable, you have to pay them. If you do not pay them, they can wind you up. They can send you into receivership for non-compliance and non-payment of bills. So this relationship is a legal relationship, and if something goes wrong, the first thing that happens is both parties go to the contract. What did we actually say needed to be created? How was it going to be created? By what time frame? What are the penalties involved? These are the things that come into play, and hopefully everything being well, the operation of the contract itself will also go well, and you'll come to the point of a contract closure. Contract is terminated, you do a post-implementation review, you take a look at the lessons learned, you can capture any knowledge going forward into the next contract. The first contract I wrote was horrible. I got not taken to the cleaners, but let's just say I could have done it a lot better. The second contract, I knew what I was doing. I ended up writing subcontracts for a number of different vendors a couple of years after I started learning something about contracts. And I'm not a lawyer, but I know what goes into a contract. What are your metrics? What are your MOV? What are your clauses in your contract that say, I will not poach your staff? What are the penalty clauses? And this is a big one, because if you don't meet certain key milestones, you may have to pay a lot of money. So how are you going to put that into the contract? Some contracts end up being very, very thick. I don't particularly like really thick contracts because no one ever really reads them well, but depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve, they can look like 3 inches thick. Big engineering contracts are famous for this sort of thing. IT projects, not so much, but IT projects are also famous for failing, or information systems projects for not meeting their targets and then having their primary companies taken into the courts and being sued. And I have seen that more times than I can tell you. I've seen companies go bankrupt, I've seen companies go out of business, I have seen big consultancies being sued and losing a lot of money. I've seen negotiated agreements so that things don't go into the trade press, because if they go into the trade press, the companies involved might lose even more money because no one will buy their products anymore or bring them in as a consultant. And I can pretty much tell you, all of the companies that you think of, the big consultancy companies that will tell you how wonderful they do in helping you run your business or creating a product for you, they have all been in court. I've worked for a couple of them. I've seen it from the inside. They know how to write a contract and they know how to play the legal game. But even when they know that, they can still end up in court. Know what your contractual obligations happen to be. If you're the project manager, you are the operational manager for either monitoring that contract for a vendor or delivering against the contract, depending on which one. So here are some basic styles of contracts. Fixed price or lump sum. A fixed price is set at total and final price for a product or service. It does this at the beginning. So basically you say, we'll give you $1 million to do this. $1 million is all you're going to get. If you go over $1 million in trying to deliver this product for us and you spend $1.2 million, we're still going to pay you only $1 million. It's a fixed price deal, which means that the company doing the work may actually lose $200,000. If they can bring it in early and ahead at a cheaper price, so maybe they're going to get paid $1 million, they can do all of the work for $700,000, they get to pocket a $300,000 profit. Now, fixed price deals are actually quite popular because it is very black and white. You either do it and deliver, or you don't do it and you end up in court. The company that contracted you will either have a working product at the end, or they will have you in court to extract money from you. Either way, they're going to come out with something. Either cash from your company, because you failed to deliver, or the working product that you promised. Do we understand what a fixed price deal is? Yeah? The next one, cost reimbursable. Payment is made to the vendor to cover the actual direct labour, materials and indirect costs such as admin, rent, utilities, etc., plus a negotiated fee. So if a project costs $1 million, then the estimate being $1 million, what happens is that if I'm doing this project for you, I have to keep all of my receipts. I have to document all of my expenses. I need to actually put figures against pretty much everything, because I'm going to submit all of those bills to you at regular points during this contract life, and then I'm going to say, okay, here is my cost. You have to pay me that. And we agreed that you're also going to pay me a profit of 10%. So whatever costs I put up, you now also pay me 10% on top of that. So me, as a vendor organisation or a contractually orchestrated provider of a service, will always walk out knowing I'm going to get at least 10%, or 15, or 20, or whatever it happens to be. But whatever it costs me, you are going to pay that plus a margin on top of it, and the margin we agree up front. But it's actually kind of hard to manage, because there is a lot of to and fro and argument about what's an appropriate cost and what isn't an appropriate cost. If you have to catch a taxi to the project room, can you put that to the client and ask them to pay for it? Do they pay for your lunches? Do they pay for your sick leave? Lots of different things could come into play here. Time and materials is, after fixed price, probably the most used one. A hybrid of cost reimbursable and fixed price. The customer pays vendor for time and materials to complete the work. It's a pay-as-you-go scheme. So at the end of every month, I will submit you an invoice for all of the work my project team has done, and you will pay that invoice. You don't know what my profit is. If I say, okay, you want a senior consultant, that's $300 an hour, and you say, I absolutely need, your most senior people, then I will charge you $300 an hour for the use of that particular person. At the end of the month, maybe that person has done 10 hours of work. You now owe me $3,000 for the 10 hours that person put in. This is a time and materials. Usually these are done on a 30-day basis, but it's a pay-as-you-go scheme. It can end up being very, very expensive for projects that are not well documented, not well spec'd out at the beginning, and run on for a long time. Because in any of those circumstances, you're still going to be putting bills to the client, and the client's going to have to pay them. At any point in time, they can say stop, but they won't get their deliverable then. Unlike a fixed price deal which says we're paying a fixed amount of money, and if you run it really well, you can walk out with a profit, and if you run it really badly, you're going to have to pay the difference. There was an example of a fixed price deal that I really loved. It was probably about 10 years ago. There was a big storm came through. It wasn't Hurricane Katrina. It was not too long after that, though, in the United States, and it was somewhere in the middle, and one of the big rivers flooded a bit. And what happened was, I forget whether it was the Missouri or the Mississippi, one of those anyway, but the water came into the town. And there was a marina on the banks of the river. And it was a pretty big river. So what happened was one of these big cabin cruisers that was sitting in the river floated into the middle of the town. Floated up Main Street and ended up in the middle of the town. So, the rain stopped, the storm went away, the water receded. Here is this big boat sitting in the middle of the town square, blocking traffic. So what happened was that the town council went to tender, very quick tender, and paid a company to come and remove the boat, to put it back in the river. And they were paying something like $100,000 for this boat to be moved, lifted up, cranes and all sorts of things. But the contractor said, you've got to move the boat back to the river. So they signed up to all of this. A couple of days after the contract was signed, before any of the cranes moved in, the storm came back. And the river broke its banks again, and the water flooded in, and what happened was, rather than bringing in the big construction crews and the big cranes and everything to lift this boat and put it on a semi-trailer or whatever and take it back to the river and lower it back into the river, it would have taken a couple of days to get all of this stuff done without damaging the boat or the street. What happened was that the contracted company sent two guys and a motorised rowboat with a rope. And they tied the rope to the front of the big boat, the cabin cruiser, trundled it back out to the river, parked it there, took the rope away. And then they sent their bill in. Took them something like half an hour. And the city council took the company to court and said, we're not paying this bill. It was too easy. You know, we expected cranes, we expected lorries, we expected all of these, you know, construction people to come in and, you know, do all of this work and, you know, prepare the street and take the boat back. And the judge ruled in the favour of the two guys on the rope because the contract was a fixed price deal that said we only have to move the boat from the middle of the town back out to the river. And they won the case. Yeah. Secret weather control. Yeah, it'd be nice if we had that. But this is a true story. The reason I relate it was I actually read it in an American newspaper when I was in the US one time. Because it was like on page 3 or whatever, and it was, you know, a humorous story, but it was a true story. So there's a perfect example of a fixed price deal where it's about the end result and the deliverable rather than the process. But you're going to pay the money irrespective of how difficult it happens to be. Contract closure. Give consideration to disengagement. How are we going to close the project down? How do we close the contract? Contracts do not go on forever. They are supposed to end. Projects by their very nature are unique endeavours that are time-bound. They do not go on forever. If you've got a project that goes on forever, one of two things has happened. Either it was never really a project, it's an operational activity that you have to repeat over and over and over again, or you've got a runaway project, in which case you've got a major problem, because this is going to keep sucking resources without delivering anything. Usually have defined periods and phases, renegotiation points, triggers, upgrades, environment, statement of work, depending upon where these deadlines are. These contracts have milestones that you have to deliver against, and if you deliver successfully, well, that's also a trigger point for negotiation. What are we doing for the next phase? Do we need to change things around? We also have disengagement triggers. One is you terminate the project because the company doing the work is not performing. They are not creating what you want. They're not doing it in the time frame you want. Termination due to a merger, where you're building a product but your company has now just been acquired or has merged with another company. They already have a piece of technology that does it better than the piece that you're creating. So you shut your project down and just migrate theirs across and start using whatever technology they have. Termination due to an acquisition, very similar to termination due to a merger, except in an acquisition what actually happens is that the acquiring company, the senior company, says to the junior partner, you will use everything that we do, and therefore the junior company that has just been acquired now has to change to make use of the senior partner's platforms and engage in that culture. Termination without cause, which is we just need to stop. And sometimes there are reasons for it. Sometimes if you're dealing with confidential products, for example, or in the defence industry, they will just stop without giving you a reason. Because it's confidential material, it's intellectual property that belongs to the company, it is national security. Sometimes these are just the things. Sorry, is that a question or just a stretch? Okay. Sometimes termination without cause. If it's in a commercial sense, and you've already had all your bills paid, that's fine. But if the project has been terminated without cause and the bills haven't been paid, then it generally ends up in court. So what are your disengagement triggers for reaching the end of a project? Because a temporary endeavour undertaken to accomplish a unique purpose. At some point, hopefully, the project ends. But the key word here, in terms of project closure, is temporary. It has a discrete beginning and a discrete end. Which brings us to the next thing. Once you've actually created the project, or the product of the project, you've got this working piece of software, what are you going to do with it now? You have to give some thought to how you bring it into operation within the company. And there are 3 different styles of being able to do this. There are, variations in this, but these are the 3 basic ones. The first one being a direct cutover, which we often call Big Bang. That is, whatever system was there already, we stop, and at the same time we stop the old system, we start with the new system. And we often burn our bridges because once you started collecting data under a new system with an incompatible architecture, you may not be able to go back to the old system. So if the new system has problems, you have to solve it on the new system. You don't have an insurance policy to go back to the way you used to do business. Parallel run says on a particular target date, what's happening is we're going to stop the old system, but the new system has already been in operation for some time before that. There's an overlap where the old system and the new system are running side by side. This gives you more insurance because you can check the data in the old system and the new system at the same time to make sure they're both the same in terms of outcome. And when you're comfortable that the new system is operating properly, you shut the old system down. And after that, you just collect data under the new system. The problem with this one, of course, even though it's a good insurance policy and helps with risk management, you're actually running two different systems, collecting two sets of data which have to be managed. There's a fair overhead in doing that because you've got people working with both systems at the same time. You've got two databases which have to be managed. You've got cross-checks happening between the data, and you're effectively running two different schemas and paying for both for the period of the parallel run. But it's another alternative to doing strenuous stress testing before you take a new product into operation. Run it side by side with the old system for a while and make sure that the checksums between the two systems match. Then we've got what we call a phased approach, which is at particular target dates, we will take a new module, maybe the new system has 6 modules, we'll take the first one live at a particular date and we'll shut down that component of the old system. And then we'll come up and take the second part of the new system live, and then the third. And at each successive point, we progressively move through shutting down the old system as the new piece of the new system comes on live, until eventually none of the old system is still operational and the new system is fully in place. That is what is called a phased approach. So these are the three things. Complete implementation, big bang, all at once. Keep your fingers crossed, hope it works. Cheapest when it does work. The second one is when you run with an insurance policy, just to make sure that the two systems are creating the same data. And the phased approach, which means we don't have to wait for the end of the project. Once we've got a working component, we can take it live while we're working on the rest. This last one you tend to see more in, it has been around for a while, but it's actually quite a popular one for things like agile development, which is, the main measure for that is working software. So it works very much in this sort of phased approach. Implementation potential outcomes: normal, premature, perpetual, failed or cancelled. Normal, everything's fine, it all worked. Sometimes you can take a system live almost accidentally because if you're doing data collection, I actually have had this one. It was a little embarrassing. I had a project manager and a project team that were ahead of their schedule, so they decided to start their testing early, and the testing was all working fine. We were meant to go live with a particular product on the following Monday. They had been collecting data almost like a parallel run for at least a week, and the data all matched up. So about Thursday of the week before it was due to go live, and we had like champagne and then celebrations in place, I got a call from a senior manager at the company we were working with and said, Grant, just to let you know that new system that we contracted you to work on? I said, yes, it's due to go live on Monday, everything's fine. He said, it's live now. Who authorised that? It is currently running our business. And I went, oops. So I busily got on the phone to my project manager and said, Mark, I won't tell you his last name, what's going on here? And my project manager said, look, it was all working fine, so we just decided we were going to stop collecting data in the old system, and we just kept collecting data in the new system. And I said, Mark, do you realise what you've done? You've actually taken this system live without all of the authorisations. And Mark went, oops. Because we've actually, he said, I never thought about it that way. We're live. Thankfully, nothing went wrong. because we had actually violated the plan and the contractual arrangements by taking it live on an unspecified date. Thankfully, everything worked perfectly. When it came to the following Monday, we still had the celebration, but the system had been really operational and running their business from the middle of the previous week. And I had an informal agreement in place with the manager of the other firm. It's like, we just won't tell anyone we did this. And he said, Grant, I don't want this to get out either, because it would be really embarrassing if the board found out that I allowed this to happen. So he and I just decided amongst ourselves, him as the head of the IT department, or the CIO in that business, and me representing my business and being the owner of the project team, with my project manager and my team out there, that we would just pretend that it was actually Monday was the real live date. And it all worked fine, thankfully. Because if something had gone wrong on the Friday, I was legally exposed. I was in violation of contract. That could have ended really, really badly. If there had been an undisclosed bug that came back and screwed up their confidential and client data because we had turned the system on prematurely without having all of the authorization to do so. Perpetual is just when you keep, it's going to go live next week. It'll go live the week after that. The week after that comes, it'll be 3 days away. Sometimes you end up playing this game of always wanting it to be perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect deliverable, but you want it to be perfect. 99% there is not good enough. I want it 100%, so I'll extend the project out a little bit more just to make more testing, to introduce different colours on the screen, to make it perform a little bit better in this area. No, sometimes it's just better to go with something that works and then leave the enhancements until later. Failed and cancelled, we've talked about in an earlier lecture. So generic life cycle, when you take a look at it, we've got the 5 phases: define the project, plan the project, execute the project, close the project, and evaluate the project. All of those have their specific aspects that we need to think about. The closure of the project and the evaluation of the project are absolutely essential, but especially when projects start running out of budget towards their end, you'll find that the activities associated with this latter two tend to get cut, and they shouldn't, because this is where the lessons learned come into play. You want this project to finish on time, fine. But the thing is, it might be better to let it run a little bit over and go a little bit more costly to make sure that you close it down properly, collect the data that you need for the lessons learned, so the next project you go into runs more effectively. You have to think ahead. Project evaluation is not necessarily about just evaluating this current project, it's about preparing the ground for the next one. So, sign off. Who are your approvals to say that we were successful? We hit our goals, our project, we delivered to the spec, we have achieved our MOV, measurable organisational value. We need to think about the final report that everyone signs off on. We need to think about relocating resources, support staff, moving the project team out, moving the client's people in, and maintenance, which is a big one. In your assignment 2, who, when you were talking about PRG as a client and creating their wonderful new system, who put in something for maintenance of the system once it goes live? Anyone? Who put in a warranty period on the software that you are creating? Because most large systems that are developed like this as a bespoke system will say something along the lines of, for the first 90 days we will support your system in case any bugs come up or there are any problems with it. Who put something like that in your plan? No one. Okay, it's just interesting. I haven't mentioned that up until now, but you'll tend to find that when most bid responses happen for an information systems project, a warranty period is usually attached, and the longer the warranty period, the more costly it is because it eats into your profits, because you've got to provide free resource, but the better goodwill it tends to achieve. So how long your warranty period goes for will accrue goodwill. Now, if you're looking to impress a client and get further run-on business, you might want to put a warranty period in there where you can support the system for a period of time and help them over any hurdles. Educate their staff, resolve any bugs, set up help desks for them. It's usually looked on very favourable. Now, you won't get penalised for not having it, but I usually look at it and say, for those that are thinking ahead, there might be a couple of bonus marks. Okay, learning cycles. Understand and frame the problem, plan, act, reflect on what you've learnt, and then save those lessons away and then go back through the cycle again. So the reflection and the learning process is really what the closure of the project and the evaluation of the project is all about. So when you go through all of these, you come up to project success here at the end, and project success is not just about we finished, or even that we finished well. It's about we finished and we learned something. What did we learn? Can we take those lessons forward? Will it help us on the next project? Every project you work on is an experience and a help to make the next project better. If you are not capturing those lessons at the end of a project, then you're not doing justice within the organisation to your project management capabilities, because this is how you get better. So, a couple of things as we're coming up to the end here, and I'll talk about the exam for a few minutes. First of all, student feedback survey. I would appreciate it, to give some good feedback on that if you can. I will solicit good feedback. Yes, please help. Say nice things about us if you really like me. If you don't really like me, well, okay, you can put that in too. I just won't like you back. It really does help us improve the quality of the course. If there are things that we've done well that you would like to see carried forward, please say that. It just means that there are some things that we can keep in mind when we change it around, if we do at different points, that there are some things we want to keep in place. Okay, so that's that. I've done my commercial that UTS says I have to do. Okay, exam. Here is where things become interesting. Okay, Thursday 22nd of June 2017. Check for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Okay, on this one I'm all care and no responsibility. You have to take a look at your own schedule, understand the time when the exam is happening, make sure that you are turning up for that time. It is 2 hours with 10 minutes reading time. So you get to have a look at the questions for 10 minutes before you can start writing. There are 21 questions. There are 10 short answer questions that you can usually answer in maybe just a couple of words up to a full sentence. So for example, I'll give you an example question. The triple constraint, on time, on scope, what is the third one? What? Within budget. Okay, great. You just scored yourself 1 mark on the exam. There you go. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about in terms of part 1. If you know what you're doing, you can pretty much get through all of part 1 in about 10 minutes, because it really only requires a sentence, maybe 2 sentences, sometimes just a couple of words. It's easy. It's a memory test. If you have paid attention and you've been through the notes and gone back over the material in terms of preparation, section 1, I kind of expect everyone should be able to get 10 out of 10. It's not hard. There are no trick questions. And the answers are very straightforward and very easy if you have been paying attention. If anything, I've probably given you the answer to all 10 at some point in the last few weeks, if you've been switched on. Part 2, 10 medium answer questions. These are worth 2 marks each. Usually this is a short paragraph, maybe 2 or 3 sentences. It is explain something. And strangely enough, I actually have the real exam paper right here. Okay. Question 12. Briefly explain the differences between Question 14. Specify and explain 2 common See? So you've got to discuss, explain. You have to show that you understand what you're talking about. There are no multiple choice questions. I expect you to actually know what you're talking about and what the answers are. You don't have to draw a PERT chart. I'll give you that one for free. Okay? You don't actually have to draw a PERT chart. I would suggest you know what goes into a PERT chart. And then we come to part 3, which is a short essay. It is divided up into 5 sub-questions, A, B, C, D and E, which in your short essay you have to be able to cover responses to each of those particular questions. So you basically just come through and you write around a short scenario that I give you, and within that scenario, what decisions are you going to make? So let me give you the beginning of it. As an experienced project manager, you have been invited to address UTS students as a guest speaker on the final class of 31272 Project Management and the Professional this term. The topic of your address is... That's the beginning of the essay question. Yes, I am a tease. This is worth 40% of your overall mark. Okay? You have to pass this. It's mandatory to pass. If you get 19 out of 20, you have failed. And there's an X grade attached to this particular course. An X grade meaning even though you've done brilliantly, you have 2 criteria to pass this course. One is you have to do at least 50% overall out of 100, and you have to get at least 50% in the final exam. That means the final exam worth 40 marks, you have to get 20 marks. If you fail to get 20 marks in the final exam, then, okay, you really haven't been paying attention because it's not a particularly hard exam, but it does require you to know what you're talking about. But if you fail to get 20 marks, then you don't get your 6 credit points. Even though you might have done brilliantly on all of the other assessments, even though you've done the best assignment 1 and your group topped out on assignment 2 and participation was perfect and you've gotten all of the marks for all of those, if you fail the final exam, you don't get your 6 credit points and you've got to repeat. So make it very, very clear. Study for the exam. As I said, there are no trick questions. It is not a hard exam, but it does require you to think over what you've learnt for the last 11 or 12 weeks. Now, I have given you a fair bit in terms of the answers if you've been figuring out what I've been telling you and emphasising for the last little while. Now, not only is it mandatory to pass this particular subject, you only get 1 bite at the cherry. Okay? You don't get to sit the main exam and say, oh, I don't think I did very well in the main exam, can I have a supplementary exam? No, there's no supplementary. You don't get a second chance. So if you fail the first exam, you can contact me, oh, Grant, I had a headache on the day, I was feeling sick. If you sat the first exam, I don't care. If you decided you were well enough to sit it, then I will go with that. I will trust your judgment. If you come to me after and said, no, I was actually sick on that day and I wasn't feeling very well, unless you're coughing up blood in the exam room, then you don't really get any other alternative. However, I will say, if you are very, very sick on the day, or you trip over and break a leg, or for whatever reason you can't attend the main exam, immediately apply for the alternate exam. There is an alternate exam that's usually held a week later. For those who, through misadventure or some reason, can't attend the main exam, even though best intentions aside they tried, there is a second chance. It's a different exam paper. I have to write 3 exam papers every term. You get to sit the second one. But you only get to sit 1 of the 2. If you go for the main one, you don't get an alternate exam. You are ineligible. If you miss the first exam and within 48 hours, and this is a calendar 48 hours, I think our original main exam is on something like is it a Thursday? Yeah? That means that if you wanted to go for the alternate exam because you missed the main exam on Thursday, you have to apply for it by Saturday. Weekends count, as part of the 48 hours. So my suggestion, if for whatever reason you have not attended the main exam, immediately apply through the forms up on the UTS website to attend the alternate exam. If you come to me and Grant said, like 3 or 4 days later, the following Monday or Tuesday, oh Grant, I missed the main exam, can I sit the alternate? I got no control over that. I can't say yes or no because it's now part of the UTS system and I cannot send you to the alternate exam. Only the exams branch can do that and they have a very strict cutoff. So you can give me any story that you like and I can be very sympathetic and I can, say, oh, terrific, you should go to another exam, except I can't authorise it. Okay? I've got no control over that. You send me any reason you like, any medical certificate, I got no chance of being able to help you. So there's just a heads up. Don't even bother trying to come to me on that one. I got no power. So you go to the main one, you've decided you can sit the main one, you sit the main exam, you automatically lose any option for the alternate. If you go and miss the main exam, apply for the alternate within 48 hours and they will send you a new date about a week later to go and sit the second one. You get one or the other, you cannot do both. There is no supplementary. If you fail the first exam, you fail the first exam. And that's it, in which case you're back here again next term. Are we clear? I'm trying to hammer this one home because every single semester people muck it up. Yeah.
Are we likely to need the full 2 hours to complete the exam?
If you know what you're talking about, you won't need the full 2 hours. You'll probably take about an hour and a half. I've tried to schedule it so that the last 25 to 30 minutes is revision time, if you know what you're doing. The other suggestion I would have for you is, even if you don't know the answer to the question, take a stab anyway. Take a wild guess if you've got no other choice. Do not leave a blank for a question on the exam paper. If you leave a blank, we can't help you. 0. But I do authorise the markers, and I'll be there in the room when it's happening, to give partial marks. We can give you a half mark for something. So even though you think you may not have the right answer and you're just going to take a stab at it, you might find that on a 2-mark question, you might get a half mark for it because it's sort of there, maybe. If we can give you the benefit of the doubt, we will. And half marks add up. Answering and partially answering can turn 16 out of 40 into a 19.5 out of 40. You get 19.5, I will round up. I will get you to 20 marks. Please meet me halfway. If you're sitting on a 19, I will find you 1 mark to get you over the line just so I can round you up to a 20. If you come in and you only do 15 or 16, I can't help you. Okay? I will try and help you where I can, but if you're coming in so low that you obviously don't know what you're talking about, there's not a lot I can do. Are there any questions on this? Please ask them now, you won't get another chance. What about things over the course of the last 11 or 12 weeks? Is there anything in there that you really have a burning desire to know a little bit more about, or a question that you wish to ask about the content of the subject as we progress through? Okay. Then I hope and I expect that you're all going to do brilliantly. I'm going to try and turn up at least at the beginning of the exam to answer any particular questions you have as you get settled into your seats. I'll try that anyway. I'll try to. I usually try and turn up at the beginning of each exam for my students. But I do genuinely wish you all of the very best. Don't take it the wrong way, but I look forward to not having you in my class next term. Thank you very much for your attendance over the last 11 weeks. It's been a pleasure. And I hope that you find that your further studies in UTS are very rewarding, and I look forward to big things from you. Okay, we're done. Thanks very much.
How do you hear about the charm or something like that, is like a RPG? So that means you give us the template, we just fill the contents for all the diagrams. Sorry,
start again. You lost me. What was that?
Oh, it's like the PRG is...
Yeah, the company.
Yeah, it's like draw the diagrams. So everything you will provide the template. We only need to build the template, or we have to learn how to draw the templates. Or what is like a requires ID or something like that.
For which one?
For the PRG, change project change.
Project change.
Or something like that. Because there's many things in this subject where you have to do all the diagrams.
Yeah, there are matrices and diagrams and all of those sorts of things. Yes.
So that means you provide the template for this one, you just build the contents and we have to draw this one. You can't. Okay, by the way.
I will tell you there is at least one example of a matrix that we have to draw.
I have to draw
Okay.
the matrix.
I won't